Hello and welcome to the Academic Flourishing Initiative webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Glenn Camiso. I'm the Executive Director of the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard University. The program's mission is to study and promote human flourishing and develop systematic approaches to the synthesis of knowledge across disciplines. Our multidisciplinary research team carries out scholarship and scientific research for the advancement of knowledge and the benefit of common good. This includes key pathways to flourishing, such as family, work, education, and religious institutions. The program has a range of initiatives designed to increase public awareness of the science of human flourishing and the adoption of practices that can improve it throughout society. Today, we are excited to share about our newly launched Academic Flourishing Initiative. During this session, you will hear an overview of the research and scope of the initiative, learn about the process for participating in this program, and then we will have a time for questions. Our first presenter is the program director and founder of the Human Flourishing Program, Tyler VanderWeele. Dr. VanderWeele is the John L. Loeb and Francis Lehman Loeb Professor of Epidemiology in the Departments of Epidemiology and Biostatistics at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. He's the director of the Human Flourishing Program and co-director of the Initiative on Health, Spirituality, and Religion at Harvard University. He holds degrees from the University of Oxford, University of Pennsylvania, and Harvard University in mathematics, philosophy, theology, finance, and biostatistics. His methodological research is focused on theory and methods for distinguishing between association and causation in the biomedical and social sciences, and more recently, on psychosocial measurement theory. His empirical research spans psychiatric and social epidemiology, the science of happiness and flourishing, and the study of religion and health. With that, I'll hand things over to Dr. VanderWeele to share about the vision and research behind the Academic Flourishing Initiative.
Well, thank you very much, Glenn, and thank you all for participating in this webinar today on our new Academic Flourishing Initiative. We have been examining these questions of flourishing in a variety of settings, from workplaces to clinics to neighborhoods to nationally representative surveys for a number of years. But about a year and a half ago, we thought we should take this flourishing lens and apply it to our home institutions, to colleges, to universities, to try to better study, understand, and promote human flourishing within academic contexts. And so in the next half hour or so, I will be providing a brief overview of our work and thinking on these matters and an invitation to join our Academic Flourishing Initiative. We will then provide a bit of an overview of some of the further practical details and hope to have at least 10 to 15 minutes for further questions. I'll begin with a brief overview of some of our grand university mission and vision statements that we find in practice. I'll talk about what we would take as the proper scope of efforts to promote flourishing in educational settings. I'll move on to discuss some of the assessments we are proposing to use at the individual, community, and student formation levels. I'll give some examples of the data collection we've carried out and what one might expect in the academic flourishing reports that we hope to provide. I'll make a case that many of these matters of student formation and character formation really are crucial to trying to accomplish the epistemic and cognitive ends and goals of universities. And then I'll provide a little bit more detail on the Academic Flourishing Initiative itself and opportunities for partnership. More information on the conceptual background for this work is available in this paper, Academic Flourishing and Student Formation, that was just recently published in the International Journal of Wellbeing, and more practical details on our Academic Flourishing website. So education unquestionably concerns formation, certainly the formation and the shaping of student minds, but arguably also the formation of persons more generally. And if we turn to our college and university mission and vision statements, we often see grand visions for this task of student formation, of trying to bring about flourishing of students, but also of broader society as well. The mission of Swarthmore College, for example, presents itself as to provide learners of diverse backgrounds a transformative liberal arts education, grounded in rigorous intellectual inquiry, and empowers all who share in our community to flourish and contribute to a better world. The mission of our own institution, Harvard College, is to educate the citizens and citizen leaders for our society. And we find similar mission and vision statements elsewhere in other countries, in Colombia and in Japan, in many liberal arts colleges, many universities throughout our country and our world. And so certainly in these mission and vision statements, one sees the centrality of what it would take as the core purpose of universities, the generation, preservation, and transmission of knowledge and developing students' cognitive capacities. But many of these mission and vision statements also aspire to more, to holistic student formation and to much broader societal contributions. If one combs through these various statements, and we have further examples of this in our paper, one finds themes along the lines of preparation for leadership, cultivation of creativity, having integrity, contributing to a better world, becoming compassionate global citizens, being equipped for lives of meaning and distinction, being enabled to flourish, educating citizen leaders for our society, living satisfying, useful, and ethical lives. Now, these are grand visions, ones we think we should be seeking to realize in practice, even though many of our efforts, in actual fact, and many of our assessments and tracking really concern more matters of a job placement and subsequent income. These are important things, but we think we should be aspiring to more and assessing more as well. But it does leave open the difficult question of, might an academic institution be aspiring to too much? Is it really within the purview of a college or university to promote all aspects of student flourishing? And I think the answer to that is no. Our lives are shaped by many other institutions, by families, by workplaces, by neighborhoods, by religious communities. And each of these has an important role in the promotion of flourishing in its own right. But I do think colleges and universities have an important role to play. So as we've been wrestling with this question of what is the proper scope for educational efforts to promote student flourishing, what we've put forward is the following, and that the proper scope of educational efforts to promote student flourishing might be specified as the developing of students' knowledge, understanding, and the cognitive skills and epistemic virtues that facilitate knowledge and understanding, which would again take as the core of college and universities' work, but along with the promotion of those aspects of student flourishing around which broad consensus can be attained and which teachers and educational leaders are prepared to address. So it's not all aspects of student flourishing, it's those around which we can agree, and I'll come to what I see as the extent of that agreement, consensus momentarily, but also for which educational leaders and teachers and faculty are prepared to address. Importantly, that second qualification, that qualification of preparation, is not one that's static. In some ways, the second qualification is aspirational. As institutions and educational leaders and faculty aspire to more and are prepared to do more, I think the extent to which we can promote student flourishing might well increase. So what is flourishing? Our working definition of flourishing at the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard is the relative attainment of a state in which all aspects of a person's life are good, including the context in which that person lives. So very all-expansive, all-encompassing, understood thus, this notion of flourishing has, I think, several important characteristics. First, it's multidimensional. We may be flourishing in certain ways, but not in others. Second, it constitutes an ideal. It's never perfectly attained. There's always room for improvement. And finally, it includes the context, communities, the environments in which a person lives. I think flourishing captures the notion that the context and communities are conducive to the growth of an individual, and also captures the notion that one participates in the common good of one's own community. So we might say we can attain a certain level of well-being in a corrupt environment or community, but one's not fully flourishing because the community itself around oneself is not good. So we typically, in our assessments and thinking, look at both individual aspects of flourishing, but then also communal aspects of flourishing as well. At the individual level, if flourishing includes all aspects of a person's life being good, it is never possible to fully enumerate all such aspects. But what we focus on in those domains of human life, for which we think these are sort of important ends that almost everyone holds, and around which we believe there's relative consensus. And we have empirical data to justify this as well. So where we begin with much of our assessment work on flourishing, not just in educational context, but in other settings as well, are the following 6 domains of human life. Happiness, life satisfaction, physical and mental health, meaning and purpose, close social relationships, character, virtue, and financial and material security. The argument's not that these exhaust flourishing, but that each is arguably an important part of it. We believe each of these is an end, and each of these is nearly universally desired. And we think those 2 criteria can help shape consensus around what to measure. So in our proposed assessments for this Academic Flourishing Initiative, amongst other questions, we are including 3 core groups of assessments. One is an assessment of individual flourishing, which I'll come to momentarily, but this is a 12-item assessment looking at 2 questions in each of those 6 domains: happiness, health, meaning, character, relationships, and financial security. The second core assessment is looking at community well-being, asking not just are the individuals, members of the community, doing well on average, but rather looking at aspects of community life that really can only be defined or thought about at the community level. Looking at whether there are good relationships in the community, whether there's proficient leadership to lead the community well that can be trusted, whether there are structures and practices in place to sustain the community and to resolve conflict, whether there's a sense of belonging and welcome in the community, and whether the community has a common mission that is clear to its members. And then our third core assessment for this Academic Flourishing Initiative, which I'll come to a little bit later, is this new student formation assessment. To what extent is the college and university helping its students to grow, certainly to grow in knowledge and their cognitive capacities, but also to grow in character, to grow in capacities for leadership and citizenship, to grow as a person. And so I'll briefly walk through each of these assessments. Our core assessment, one that we introduced in the 2017 paper in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences and have used with millions of participants to date, consists of 2 questions in each of those 6 domains: 2 questions on happiness and life satisfaction, 2 questions on physical and mental health, 2 questions on meaning and purpose, 2 questions on character, strengths, and 2 questions on close social relationships, 2 questions as well on financial and material stability. These questions are here because of time constraints. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's more information on this assessment and its psychometric properties on our website. We've used this as the core of our global flourishing study, a study of over 200,000 individuals in 22 countries, representing about half the world's population. So we have quite a bit of benchmarking data on this core individual flourishing assessment. But as I noted, we are supplementing this work and these assessments with assessment of community well-being. Is the college or university flourishing as a community? Are there good relationships in the community of respect, trust, and a sense of mutuality? Is there proficient leadership? Does the leadership care about the members of the community, have a sense of integrity, competence, vision? Are there healthy practices and structures within the community to enable relational growth, to resolve conflict, to sustain the community, to help the college, the university achieve its goals? Is there a sense of satisfaction and belonging in the community where everyone feels valued and welcome? Is the university's purpose and mission clear to everyone? Its contribution to the world to make it a better place? the necessity of everyone in the community to help it achieve its goals, so that the college or university can very clearly do more collectively than each could do individually. So students are also asked to report on their sense of the university or college's community well-being. And then the third assessment, one that we are just beginning to use, we've used the community well-being and the individual flourishing assessment in many other settings, but really the step forward here is this new student formation assessment. Many student surveys at present are focused on questions of mental health and often also bias and discrimination, and we think these are important and should be continued, but we would hope to supplement these sorts of assessments with questions on student formation, with questions on whether students see college and university life helping them to grow as a person, as well as to grow in knowledge and capacities for critical thinking and preparation for leadership. Assessments essentially oriented towards, are we as educational institutions really achieving those grand mission and vision statements that I think we rightly put forward. And so this new assessment consists of 24 questions broken up into 4 different domains with 6 questions in each of these domains, asking students, to what extent has university life helped you in various areas and cognitive and epistemic capacities, virtues and character development, citizenship and societal contribution, meaning and growth. Importantly, we're not asking here whether students, for example, are wise, but whether they perceive the university or college to having helped them to grow in wisdom. And so while these are self-report questions and should be taken with a grain of salt, the fact that we're not asking about the student's own character, for example, but rather the university or college's contribution to their development, we think likely suggests that the responses are perhaps more reliable and more likely to be trustworthy. So these 24 questions, which I will read through, are as follows. Each of these is self-assessed on a scale of 0 to 10, where the students say from 0 not helped at all to 10 helped a great deal. So we're asking the students, to what extent has university life helped you to increase in knowledge, to think clearly, to pursue truth, to recognize when you are in error so as to be able to change your understanding, to understand perspectives different from your own, to learn how to express yourself well. And in the character domain, to what extent has university life helped you to become more honest, to develop courage, to have a love of learning, to become more wise, to become more just, to lead a moral life? Then with regard to citizenship and societal contribution, to what extent has university life helped you to develop character strengths in order to make meaningful contributions to society, to understand what you can contribute to your country, to equip you to positively change the world, to treat everyone respectfully, to help with creative problem solving when working with others, to work with people with diverse political and religious beliefs? And then finally, personally, with regard to meaning and growth, to what extent has university life helped you to find meaning in life, to appreciate beauty, to flourish as a person, to pursue your goals, to live your life in a healthy way, to have good relationships with others? So we developed these questions and then went through cognitive interviews with students at Harvard University, at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and at Campus Biomedico in Rome to further refine and supplement. These questions really are intended as an inventory rather than as a scale. We think the responses to these questions can vary quite considerably within an institution, even in the same domain. So it might be helpful sometimes to average over for simple summary purposes, but we really do take these as 24 separate single item assessments. But we think these sorts of assessments can help understand what is going well and where are the challenges within a particular institution. Also, which groups are doing well and which may be struggling more, and where further outreach and support may be necessary. They can be helpful in seeing how things are changing over the 4 years, say, of college life, longer term, one might even sort of go on to assess alumni and look at how these aspects of student formation might contribute to students later in life, or how different interventions or programs may have affected these various aspects of student formation. As just a brief example, and there's more information on this in our sample report available on our website, but I'm going to give some perturbed data, combining data from two institutions where we've already carried out this work with further perturbations to preserve kind of the actual scores from the participating institutions. But there are some interesting similarities in the institutions we've collected data on already. So this data mostly comes from the spring semester of 2025. Again, looking at student individual flourishing, community well-being, and then the student formation assessments. And one of these institutions did more campus-wide assessments. There were 5 email requests that went out. There was a lottery compensation. Response rates were relatively low in spite of that, about 10%, which is not unusual for campus surveys. So this may not be representative, but we did weight responses, and we intend to continue to weight responses to match the overall demographic characteristics of each institution, and the weighted and unweighted analyses were relatively similar. But just to give you a sense as to what might appear in these reports, should you so decide to participate in this initiative, if one looks at the overall mean response, 0 to 10 on these student formation questions, the overall response aggregating across these two institutions and some perturbed data as well was relatively high, 7.3 on the scale of 0 to 10. As we'll see, it does vary by question, but relatively high. The overall student flourishing score was also relatively high, again, nearly 7.4. And this compares quite favorably to flourishing scores we see in the United States for the 18 to 24-year-old age group. Those are around 6.3 in the United States on average. So students at these institutions were doing quite a bit better than young adults in the United States overall. The university community well-being and both of these institutions was somewhat lower, 5.8 on average. But then, we also in these reports break this up by domain, by happiness, health, meaning, character, close relationships, and financial security. Similar to many other surveys, students are struggling with questions of mental and physical health. That was the lowest score on average. And then we did see somewhat lower community well-being scores than we did with regard to individual assessments of flourishing. Whether this pattern is more universal or whether this is restricted more to these two institutions, we hope to learn in the year and years ahead as we continue to carry out this work with other institutions. But one can also look at kind of changes over time as students progress through the 4 years of college life. With this data, we see, for example, general increases from freshman to sophomore year, but then either leveling off or in some cases a decline afterwards. And so again, this data can perhaps provide insight into the typical student experience over 4 years of college. One can also take those student formations and look at the relative strengths and possibly relative areas for growth at a particular institution. So when averaging over this data, we see some strengths being an increase in knowledge, capacity to pursue goals, an understanding of perspectives, different from one's own, flourishing as a person. But we move towards the bottom. Each of those had a score of around 8. We see 4 scores below 7. Not terribly low, but certainly quite a bit lower than the others. Living life in a healthy way, finding meaning in life, becoming more honest, contributing to one's country. So these might be seen as areas for an institution, for example, to work on, to try to strengthen and improve. One can look at those different aspects of student formation across the 4 years of college as well. As one might hope to see, averaging over these institutions, we see a growth in the cognitive and epistemic capacities every year higher than the year before. But with many of these other aspects of student formation, we see it flat or in some cases even slight decline. So once again, this sort of data can give insights into student experience and where additional efforts might be made. One can also look across, say, the 24 student formation indicators, the change from freshman year to senior year. In many cases, one might see growth, but in other cases, a decline. When averaged over these institutions, one sees the largest decline here, for example, as to what extent has university life helped you to become more honest? And I think data like this is concerning, but points to where more work may need to be done. We have also, in collaboration with the Oxford Character Project, embedded 4 of these student formation questions into the Wall Street Journal survey of US colleges and universities. And so we have some benchmarking data on 4 of these questions. In particular, to what extent has university life helped you to become more wise, to become more just, to positively change the world, to develop character strengths and order, to make meaningful contributions to society. And these sorts of questions, I think, can provide an alternative view of the relative strengths and weaknesses of our colleges and universities. Here are sort of the top 20 or so on just one of the questions: to what extent has university life helped you to grow in wisdom? We have here stratified by secular versus religious institutions, because in some ways student formation is going to be easier for a small institution with shared values than, say, a large public research university that's trying to serve a pluralistic audience. But we've provided data, at least on the ranges of 429 institutions on this blog post in Psychology Today, if you want to look up the relative strengths of your own institution, if we're one of the participating ones in the Wall Street Journal survey. The Wall Street Journal did give this 4% of the weight in their ranking. We are not, with this Academic Flourishing Initiative, going to be in the business of ranking. Really, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to enable, is each institution to assess their own strengths and their own areas for growth, and to collectively work together to achieve these grand mission and vision statements that our colleges and universities, that our educational institutions put forward. Now, different institutions will value different aspects of student formation to differing degrees. We've divided these student formation questions into 4 groups: cognitive and epistemic capacities, character formation, citizenship and leadership, and meaning and growth. And some institutions, I think especially research universities, may say it's really those cognitive and epistemic capacities, that growth in knowledge and that contribution to knowledge, is what we're here for, and that's what we want to focus on. And so I think each institution has the flexibility to focus on which aspects of these questions of student formation seem to be of greatest importance. But we do think that some emphasis on character formation is important to even achieve those cognitive and epistemic aims, to allow for civil discourse, to allow for persistence and perseverance in the pursuit of knowledge, to ensure integrity and honesty in carrying out academic work and research. So we would argue that pretty much all institutions, we think, should care at least to some extent about questions of character formation as well. We've seen that many institutions also aspire to train citizens and leaders for society, and for those, that third domain of citizenship and leadership may be important. And then some of these vision and mission statements also suggest contribution to the flourishing of the student, to the growth and to the finding of meaning in students' lives. And so that fourth domain may be important to some institutions as well. We think almost all colleges and universities, at the very least, hope that their extracurricular programming and their student groups help with that growth and formation, and so perhaps are worthwhile to assess these various aspects of growth and flourishing as well. But again, even for an institution that's really focused on the generation, preservation, and transmission of knowledge as being the core purpose of the university, we think some emphasis on character formation is also important. I think courage and honesty are necessary to be able to raise perhaps a minority or controversial viewpoints. That patience, humility, justice are important in civil discourse. That a certain love of learning and patience and perseverance is necessary for acquiring knowledge. That humility and practical wisdom are needed for carrying out original research, and that integrity is critical for academic life more broadly. And so in a companion paper, we've kind of argued that various character strengths really are critical to academic life, both for students and also for educational leaders as well. And so even for institutions that want to focus on the generation, preservation, and transmission of knowledge, that there should be some emphasis, at least, on character formation as well. So we very much believe that these assessments may help reorient colleges and universities back towards those grand aspirations and their mission and vision statements. We think when this data is collected over time, it can help identify the strengths and the areas of growth for institutions. It can help identify groups that need help. It may allow for an assessment of whether various initiatives and programs are effective. While we're starting with students and student flourishing, we hope also to expand this over time to staff and faculty flourishing assessments as well. And we very much believe that what we measure shapes what we discuss, what we know, what we aim for, the policies put in place to achieve those aims. So we think the very act of measurement, of carrying out these flourishing assessments, these community well-being assessments, and these student formation assessments will itself begin to alter the nature of the conversations that are taking place and the sorts of initiatives that may come into being. We think this sort of work will help reorient institutions to achieving those grand ambitions in their mission and vision statement. So we hope over time that this work will help inform policies, programs, decision-making, and interventions that might be made. And so we are inviting institutions to join our Academic Flourishing Initiative and this Flourishing Data Collaborative. And the basic idea is that we would be carrying out standardized surveys focused on those areas of individual student flourishing, community, college and university well-being, and student formation, and that we would be providing reports on this data to each participating institution. We'd also be breaking this down by different demographic groups and by year within college to gain further insights and where further outreach and help may be needed. The hope also is to bring colleges and universities together to discuss the results, to share best practices, to form a community of practice of sorts, to help advance these aims of academic flourishing. So in terms of timeline, what we're hoping in the weeks and months ahead is to sign up as many institutions as want to participate. This will be a membership model, approximately $10,000, which will help with carrying out these standardized assessments with the reports and with hosting events. So we intend to carry out data collection in the spring of 2026. This allows freshman students, for example, to have at least experienced a semester or so of university life. Later in the spring of 2026, we'd be providing approximately 40-50 page report for each participating institution on the various aspects of student flourishing and formation at their institutions. And then late spring and summer of 2026, we'd hold collaborative meetings to discuss the results, to provide some benchmarking data, to allow institutions to share their strengths and their struggles, and to hopefully share best practices. We do expect some heterogeneity in responses across institutions, and so to learn from one another about what's working well and what might not be. In these reports, we also are going to be trying to consolidate resources for institutions that might want to do more than data collection, to document how various institutions have carried out this work of character formation and student formation, to highlight various leadership programs on civil discourse, to highlight some of the work in positive psychology and character interventions on the promotion of strengths such as gratitude, kindness, forgiveness, compassion, patience, perseverance. And so each of these reports will have further resources that educational leaders can make use of, and a set of resources that we hope over time will continue to expand as each institution shares what has worked well. So that provides kind of a high-level overview of what we're trying to achieve with this work. Again, more information on the conceptual background for what we're trying to do is this 2025 paper on academic flourishing in student formation, along with a supplemental paper on virtues for academic flourishing, kind of arguing for the importance of character formation in higher education, even to accomplish the college university aims and the generation, preservation, and transmission of knowledge. A lot of this information is summarized on our Academic Flourishing webpage. We also have a brochure that provides more of the concrete details on the Academic Flourishing Initiative itself and what institutional participation looks like. We've provided a summary of a lot of this on our Psychology Today website, and there have been helpful media pieces just earlier this month and Inside Higher Education and Learning Well. So we do hope that many of you will consider participating, and would be happy to have further discussions if you are interested. We'll be doing brief introductions of other members of our team, Suzanne Ouyang, Reese Brown, and Brendan Case, who will be helping to coordinate this Academic Flourishing Initiative and Data Collaborative in practice. And so with that, I will turn things over to them. But thank you all for being here. It's been wonderful to see such participation and interest in this work, and we hope to partner with many of you in the months ahead. Pat, I'll hand it over to Reese and to others.
Well, thank you, Tyler. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been fantastic thus far. I do want to make a few notes about the remainder of our time. We're going to try to leave as much time as we can for Q&A. Do want to say, while we're a scholarly community, please hold your theoretical questions. We have a very long publishing record, at the Flourishing Program, lots of resources online that you can read. In particular, I would point everyone to two recent brochures. One's the Introductory Framework, which you can find on the website, covers many of the questions that have come up in the chat thus far, as well as the Academic Flourishing brochure, which we've just released in the last few weeks. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the Data Collaborative and the registration process for the Academic Flourishing Initiative. So generally speaking, what Tyler covered is indeed the movement in many ways. The pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus was often attributed for saying that character is destiny. And we truly do believe that character is implicated in flourishing, it's implicated in student formation, and that these students that many of us all focus our work around, their destiny is very much intertwined with the work of student formation and flourishing. So the Academic Flourishing Initiative is dedicated to that. But we also have more of a mechanical and structural operation here as well, which is the Flourishing Data Collaborative. The Flourishing Data Collaborative is embedded within the Academic Flourishing Initiative, and it is the engine and central hub where we're bringing members into the community, we're tailoring the survey process around your needs, and analyzing data. In a few moments, my colleague Suzanne Ouyang is going to describe much of that work, but what I'm going to discuss is just the registration process as it stands right now. The first thing I would do is many of you received an email in the last few days that describes some of that registration process. You can also find that on the website, on our Human Flourishing website, But the first thing to do is to reach out to any one of us on the team. Any one of us would be happy to connect with you, but primarily with my colleague Brendan and myself. We're the ones who are really fielding a lot of the questions and considering suitability for your campus. The second thing I would do is, or the second thing to do is to read the Data Use Authorization Agreement. You can find this on the resources section of our webpage. The Data Use Authorization Agreement is certainly the most important step in coming on board to the Academic Flourishing Initiative. There are two pathways to think about as you review the Data Use Authorization Agreement. The first is the standardized Data Use Authorization Agreement, which is essentially taken as is. Taken as is, the cost for membership is $10,000, and that DUA we worked on for many months with our Office of General Counsel at Harvard. It has been designed to be broadly appealing and to follow best practices for data collection. So that is the preferred pathway. However, we also have an adaptable version, which is if you need to make changes and tailor the DUA according to various institutional limitations, you can do so. That will end up being $15,000. So the third thing, yes, determine if the standardized DUA or adaptable DUA best suits your needs. The fourth thing would be to sign that Data Use Authorization Agreement. The next step after that would simply be to wire funds. The instructions for that are on our website. Wire is certainly the most preferred. We can do a check as well. And then the last step will be to set up a meeting with our team to create a plan around data collection. And that ultimately brings in Suzanne and the data reports, which she's going to discuss now. Suzanne.
Thanks, Reese. It's wonderful to be with everyone today. My name is Suzanne Ouyang, and I serve as the Associate Director of Special Projects. I'll be working with you to get the survey tool customized for your university and up and running, but it's very straightforward. We use Qualtrics as our survey platform. So we will generate an anonymous survey link, which will be able to be distributed to your students. And then after data collection is completed, you'll receive a customized report with your survey results with analyses for the different areas that Tyler has already provided snapshots of in his presentation. And I'll pull that up for you right now just so that you can see. This report is also available on our website. And so you're welcome to look at it in more detail at your leisure. But you'll see here that the main sections include that core flourishing metric that Tyler mentioned, then the student formation, which are those questions that Tyler went through in greater depth, and then university community well-being questions. So these are each broken out into the means for all the students, and then also by year in schools. So you'll get to see both the means across the years, but also the overall means by the domains, and then by the individual questions as well. And then these summaries of data will also be broken out into broader categories such as gender, race, ethnicity, and religious affiliation. So we have the breakouts by year, but also by those demographic categories. So I'm very happy to take any questions that come up along the way. We really thank you for your time today and look forward to working with you.
Thanks, Suzanne. And then just passing it off to you, Brendan, as to share a little bit about some of the way that we're thinking about the data already.
Thanks, Reese. It's great to be with you all. I don't have a great deal to add to the excellent remarks that my colleagues have made already, but I'm partly coming on here just to allow you to put a face to my name. As Reese mentioned, I hope that he and I will be corresponding and having calls with many of you in the months and weeks to come, and look forward to working with you on this exciting project. Yeah, I think the last piece of the puzzle that I'll comment on just very briefly is what you do after the survey. We'll send you back this attractive, digestible report that Suzanne has worked hard to create, that we've sort of been collaborating on. And then the question for you as an institution is, so what do you do? with that. And this is a question we're certainly keenly interested in. You know, part of our mission as a program is not only to study, but also to promote flourishing. And we really hope that the data generated by the Data Collaborative and this initiative becomes a resource for enacting change, you know, positive change and real reform on your campuses, for addressing areas of growth and also allowing you to trumpet areas of strength that maybe you haven't been assessing as an institution to date. And so we're certainly keen to stay in conversation with you on an individual basis about how you might best intervene on your campus on the basis of what you learn from these assessments year to year. We also hope that the Data Collaborative and the Academic Flourishing Initiative will become a genuine community of practice, so that you will not just be partnering in a dyadic way with us as an institution, but will also be entering into a genuine community of like-minded institutions, growing community committed to assessing and promoting academic flourishing in higher ed. And one of the key tasks for the Academic Flourishing Initiative for the next year is to begin to foster those kinds of exchanges through members-only gatherings, probably initially via webinars like this, where we'll come together to reflect on our common work. The first of those will probably be in a couple of months. We'll convene members to think about the logistics of implementing the survey and think about best practices. And we hope to learn from you. I mean, the point is not, this very much is not just for us to talk at you about what you ought to do, but to provide all of us a chance to think and learn together. So again, it's a joy to be with you, and I'm looking forward to the work.
Brilliant. So I'm going to go ahead and start moving through the Q&A, and we'll see how much of this we can get through. I wanted to answer a couple of the easy questions. One came from Monica, which was whether or not a master's program could participate in the initiative. The answer is absolutely yes. The only thing that we are unable, the key question is whether something is school-wide at this point. What we're looking for is a degree-seeking program. What we're not able to accommodate yet is small concentrations, or let's say subunits within a school, but master's programs, graduate programs, certainly anything that is school-wide at this point is certainly in the target for sure. The other easy one was a question that came up about getting access to the data report. Many of these things can be found on the Academic Flourishing Initiative website. The sample report is in the resources section, as well as the data use authorization agreement. Both of those you can download, find easily, and as well as a frequently asked questions page, where hopefully some of these things are resolved in advance. So please go ahead and jump into the chat. Raise any questions that you have. I did want to ask Tyler if you might be interested in weighing in on there was a question about weighting and sampling of the data, in particular how let's see.
Yeah.
I think there's both the faith-based question, how weighting is working there, and there was one more. But if you had any thoughts on that, I'll try.
Sure. So with regard to weighting, the reports will give weighted data and the raw averages as well. We've been following practices with a lot of other college and university surveys, and the weighting's fairly crude. So we have, I think, race, ethnicity, gender, and then year in the program. Over time, we may do something more sophisticated, but that's what we are planning to do, at least for this first year. The reports will provide breakdown by demographic information as well, and that's a larger number of categories. We'll probably expand yet further. The sample report was our first pass at this. We'll be doing a bit more piloting work in the fall, so the final report might be 50 pages rather than 40 pages, and suggestions are certainly welcome. And we do anticipate when we have these collaborative meetings to discuss best practices and how the reports have been useful and have not been useful, that we will continue to refine this. So we are very open to feedback. I did also see kind of a more conceptual question on definition of the good. And we certainly wrestle with this a great deal at the Human Flourishing Program. The perspective that we've taken is that well-developed conceptions of flourishing are going to vary across traditions and cultures and philosophical and religious systems, and some of that heterogeneity just needs to be acknowledged. What we've tried to do is focus on what we see, at least, as being common across many different conceptions of flourishing. And so, what we've argued in much of our academic work, and also when we've been carrying out data collection, is whatever else flourishing might include, it would arguably also include, again, happiness, health, meaning, relationships, character, and financial and material stability. Not that flourishing is reducible to those domains, but that each of these things does seem to be nearly universally desired and an important part of whatever else flourishing might consist in. So that's kind of what's been grounding a lot of our empirical work and assessment work on flourishing across contexts, with kind of an acknowledgement that many particular communities would have a much richer understanding of flourishing as well. There was a question also on pre-test assessments, and certainly an institution would be very welcome to collect data on all of these questions in principle to their incoming students before they start. At least this first year, we will not be doing that ourselves, but we are very happy to share the questions. And if a particular institution wanted to do that kind of pre-test data before freshman students even began, so that there was benchmarking for the spring semester data collection, that would be entirely fine. All of the core questions we are using are in that 2025 paper on academic flourishing and student formation. So those are publicly released. You're welcome to make use of those as you see fit in pre-test or other initiatives. Again, we're not trying to restrict this in any way, but simply to provide a standardized on-board ramp to participate in this work together.
Tyler, I've seen a few different mentions of faculty and staff at university. One question came here asking if individual students would see their responses. These data are completely anonymized, and so even if we wanted to do that, we can't. Tyler, could you speak a little bit about the sort of intersection between the individual, the aggregate, and then the community well-being survey, and sort of how we can interpret results based on the compilation of all three in our survey?
Yeah, so the data collection is entirely anonymized. Students will not be able to see their own responses, and everything in the report will be aggregated. Though again, we will break this down by demographic groups, and the data could be used in other ways as well. There was a question also on linking student responses across years if institutions participate over time. We do not yet have the capacity to do that. We would hope to build that out in the years ahead, but the data privacy issues do become more complicated. We do have an umbrella IRB now for all participating institutions, given the current infrastructure that we are working with, but again, to link individual student responses over time will take more work. We hope to get there eventually, but we are not there yet. It would be wonderful for research purposes to have that panel longitudinal data on individual students. We do hope that institutions will participate over several years to see how things are changing over time at an institution, and what's getting better and what may be getting worse and what may be staying the same, and whether particular programs or interventions might be successful. And so with time, we'll also be working out a way to look at an institution's responses across multiple years, but that will still be at the aggregate level rather than at present at the individual level. We do also hope to expand to staff and faculty at each institution. Our definition of academic flourishing is all aspects of an academic institution's life are good. So that would include the flourishing of faculty members and the flourishing of staff. And we think it's entirely reasonable to use our core flourishing questions and also the community university well-being questions as they are for faculty and staff. And if an institution wanted to do so at present and didn't want to wait for us to set up that infrastructure, again, you'd be more than welcome to do so. So we do have plans to expand this work to faculty and staff, but we are not there yet. This first year, we'll be focusing on students. But as I said before, each institution is welcome to make use of any of these resources, any of this work, any of these questions in whatever way they would like to as well.
Tyler, there was a question about size of a university. If you're a small college with roughly 2,100 students, can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're happy to have institutions of any size, small or large, participate. With a small institution, if response rates also low, then some of the demographic breakdown might not be quite as helpful if sample sizes get too small, and that information will be provided, and then you'll have to make the determination whether the sample size is sufficient to draw reliable conclusions. But certainly, the aggregate data would still be useful, even with a small institution with only a modest response rate. And I think also the changes across years from freshman to senior year would still be of considerable interest and potential insight for a small institution as well.
Brilliant. So many of these questions. Sample of the survey itself. No, I would highly encourage everyone to read the brochures that we've made available online. You'll actually see the items in the survey listed there, so you can actually get an idea of what the questions are that are being asked, as well as many of the sort of items, topics. We've spent quite a bit of time discussing in detail. So many of these questions can be answered by just visiting the resources section of the website. You'll find many of those things. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. Tyler, did you see any more that you wanted to answer before we sign off?
Yes, there was one question on, do you need to create your own infrastructure? No, we have the Qualtrics survey set up, so all a participating institution would need to do is to send that out to their students. We would recommend, again, multiple attempts at contacting to try to get response rates as high as possible. Could consider having incentives, but the infrastructure is all there. You don't need to design your own surveys. The Qualtrics survey is ready to go, and then will generate kind of an automated report for each institution. So we're trying to keep the lift relatively low. There's also a question as to next steps. Please write to either East Brown or Brendan Case if your institution is interested in signing up. We'd be happy to do so. Essentially, the next steps are signing data use agreement and then making the $10,000 membership contribution. We'll be hosting a meeting in the fall to discuss next practical steps for those institutions who have decided to join this Flourishing Data Collaborative. But once again, we're really delighted to see such interest, and several hundred already joining in to this webinar, and we hope some of your institutions might consider joining this Academic Flourishing Initiative. We really very much hope to advance flourishing of students, but really of the whole of the academic community at our various institutions. So thank you all once again for participating.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Just as a point of information, we'll make this recording available on our website in the coming days. But thank you for your interest in flourishing and your dedication to student formation. But that's all we have for today. Thank you so much.